in this scenario, you could be bringing in $71,000 a year.
We made $1,000 in 11 days. You what?
And that would be enough to retire off of, if you ask me.
I made a calculator that'll tell you how much you can expect to make as a return with your Illuvium Zero Land. I even included a profit share component that will show you the returns for both the owner and the renter. I will short clips throughout this video from Illuvium core contributors backing up my findings. So let's get into it.
All right, so here's my spreadsheet. Quickly, I'll go through how I came up with some of these numbers, and then we'll plug some new numbers in and see how it changes things. So first, you can see that I have a few spots that are purple. Those are the spots that you can change, and everything else will adjust accordingly. You can see this third column down, I have the share. How I figured that out was with this down here. Basically what I did is I divided up the number of total fuel sites and multiplied it by how many sites are on that tier of land. The one little extra piece is the tier 4 landmark is a fuel landmark. It gives a 10% fuel boost to one of the 3 fuel sites, and with 9 fuel sites on average there will be 3 that get that boost. So for the total share I bumped it up by 3%. Now if we go back up top, you'll see that I have the 5%. This 5% is because Kieran and the Illuvium team has mentioned that the landowners would get about 5% of the total Illuvium revenue.
That's why it's so important. We're approximating around about 5% of all in-game revenues will come, will stream back to landholders.
In this box right here, you can see, because it's purple, I can make adjustments to it, and then it calculates what 5% of that number is a couple columns over. And then as you go across the board, it will tell you what you can expect for your yearly earnings, and then if you're using a renter, if you're not using a renter and you're playing yourself, you can just keep this at 0, and then how many days you want to look at. Now before we get into changing some of the numbers around, let's take a look at some of these notes down here. So this is going to assume that all tiers require about the same amount of time, which we're looking at 20 to 30 minutes per plot. And you can take a quick look at this clip to see what I'm talking about.
You need about 20 to 30 minutes a day to optimize the most amount of output you can out of your land.
This also assumes that all land is matured. What I mean by that is that all components of the land are maxed out. Elements are primarily what's going to be used to build up the structures and max out the land. So the higher tiers are actually going to mature faster than the lower tiers. For tier 3 lands is actually an element landmark that, just like the fuel landmark, it will boost one of the 3 elements by 10%. So a tier 3 actually gets a little boost in how fast your land can mature. These numbers that I'm going off of are based on averages. Depending on the type of fuel sites, element sites, and landmarks can also play into this. So it is important to know that different fuels can have a different demand in the market. So if you happen to have a fuel site that is in a higher demand in the market, you will be able to get more of a return for that. This will also require a competent renter who will know when they should convert one fuel to another based on the demand in the market. And with that being said, you as an owner should have a good communication line with the renter to figure out what fuel should be converted and when to sell a particular fuel into the pool to generate the most return. And you can see what I'm talking about in a quick video right here.
And so the way that it works is depending on the demand on the other side, in terms of like, let's pull out travel, for example. If we have a massive rush of players that come into the main game and they start traveling heaps, and so there's a demand for that specific fuel type, what's going to happen is you're going to see that price go up. And as the landowners who are extracting that fuel type see that, they're going to go, okay, well, I'm getting a high premium for my fuel right now, so it's a good time to sell. Shards require a different type of fuel, and where it gets interesting for the landowners is they need to figure out, how do I get the largest premium from my fuel? And it might even be the case that they need to convert their fuel. If you're sitting there and you're like, well, my fuel site only produces that type of fuel, that's Solons, for example, but you need Hyperions because that's what is required for curing shards, you're going to then, on your land, actually convert the fuel. There's about a 5-10% loss in converting it, but it's your job to go, well, I'm getting half the price for my Solons, Hyperion's are double that, right? Like I'm going to take the 5-10% loss from converting that fuel type and sacrifice it. And then I'm going to sell Hyperions into the pool, which will give me that more premium price.
I plan to play one plot from each of the 4 tiers of land and make videos on the progress and the returns I make. So make sure you subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any of that.
So when we go to plugging some numbers into the spreadsheet, I'm really just going off of 2 numbers, a bull case and a bear case. And we're going to look at what Axie Infinity did in the year of 2021, and then what they've done so far in the year of 2022. In 2021, they have had a revenue of about 1.3 billion, and in 2022, so far, they've been making about 1 to 2 million in revenue per week. So we're looking at around 52 to 104 million for the year. So there is a big difference there. So we'll look at both prices. It's also important to note that at its peak, there were about 2.7 million active weekly players for Axie Infinity. And Kieran has mentioned that he expects 5 to 10 million, if not more, playing Illuvium at some point. But there is a little clip to show this right here.
Which again, we're expected to have 5-10 million players. That's the demand on the other side for this fuel will be quite considerable if we can achieve those numbers. And yeah, being a landholder gives you that agency to go.
So this is the bull case. And here you can adjust the revenue however you'd like, but we're going to go with that 1.3 billion and look at how the numbers play out. So for plots of land, we're just going to keep it at 1 apiece so we can see what the return looks like. So your yearly returns are going to be right here. You can see with a tier 1 plot, you can expect about $1,300, a tier 2 a little over 4,000, tier 3 a little over 8,000, over 12,000 for tier 4. And then you can even go down to how much you're making per day. So right here, I have the days set at 1 day. And since the renter is set at 0, you can see playing your own plot is going to return you really only about $4 a day for a tier 1, a little over $11 a day for tier 2, 22 for a tier 3, and 33 for a tier 4. Sometimes it's hard to grasp what that means per day. So if we look at this in terms of a month, so if we go 30, you can see that a tier 1 plot could get you about $112 for the month. A tier 2, about $336. Tier 3, $672. And a tier 4, about $1,000 per month. Now this is really the bull case right here. So let's look at the bear case. So if we look at the low end of what Axie Infinity is doing in 2022, we're looking at about 50 million for the year. If we bring the days back down to 1 day, you can see that a tier 1 land might only be earning you about $1.44 per day. And you can go down and see it goes to $4, $8, and about $13 as you go up to tier 4. Again, we'll look at the monthly return by plugging in 30. Tier 1 might only be bringing you in about $43 per month. And then as you go up, 129, 258, and 388. So in this bear case, these numbers don't look too great, but I'm guessing throughout the first year, we're somewhere in the middle of those 2 numbers. And if we're looking out multiple years, we'll probably be much closer to the higher end. So back down to the notes here, I want to talk about if you're using a renter or a scholar.
Yeah, so again, this is more for the larger land plot holders. It's for people that are time poor. It's an awesome investment, right, for someone. However, when you tell them, okay, sweet, you've convinced me, I'm going to drop $1 million on land. I think I'm going to be able to recuperate it. But that's going to cost you, 50 hours a day of actually maintaining these land plots. That's when it starts going, okay, well, how? I don't have time to do that. And so in comes this rental platform, which allows anyone to go on and say, you can lease out my land plot. You can accumulate all the fuel that you want. When they sell that, you've organized a profit split that can be customizable. It's whatever you want. It's again a negotiation between yourself and the person who's renting out your land. You've got one person who's making a passive income who doesn't need to do anything to manage this land, and then you've got the people who are happy who don't have the necessarily the capital up front to go and spend 1-2 ETH on a land plot. They get access to it. They can slowly accumulate some revenue through selling fuel over time.
So I just asked in my Discord, what the average minimum wage is for someone in the Philippines. And why I asked them is because between doing Axie Infinity and now Fancy Birds, the majority of my scholars are from the Philippines. So they already understand GameFi, NFT gaming, and I think a lot of people using renters are probably going to have some luck finding them from the Philippines. So they said their minimum wage is between $1 and $1.30 per hour. And if we're looking at one of these plots of land taking 20 to 30 minutes, you're looking at about 50 to 65 cents for someone for the Philippines for this to be worth it for them. And just below, for Fancy Birds, I'm giving out about 30% to a lot of my scholars, and you can play one of those birds in about 6 minutes. So if you scale that up to an hour, you're looking at about that $1 per hour. So those numbers do make sense. So let's go back to the bull case at 1.3 billion and for 1 day. So let's say you wanted to give the renter 25%. What you'll see for a tier 1 land, the renter is going to be making about 93 cents per day for that plot of land. But when you consider that that's only about a half an hour, if the renter's from the Philippines, they're actually making more than their minimum wage. So you actually have an opportunity to drop this down a little bit more. So at 20%, they're making about 75 cents for that half an hour. Again, that is above the Philippines minimum wage. At 15%, the renter is making 56 cents per day, where it only takes them half an hour to play. And that's returning the owner a little over $3. Now you can see how I have this scaling down so that each plot of land would give the same return. So you can see with a tier 2, you would only need to give 5% share. With a tier 3, you'd give about 2.5% share. In a tier 4, you give about 1.6% share. And this is for that scholar or renter to make about 56 cents for that half an hour, which is above the Philippines minimum wage. And you can see how much the owner can get in return with these numbers. And then we can just have a little fun with it. So say you're a big guild or you just bought a bunch of plots of land for yourself. Let's say you ended up with 10 plots of tier 1 land, 5 of tier 2, and then you bought a couple each of the tier 3 and tier 4. No one has a tier 5 yet. We'll go back to that bull case at 1.3 million per year. And if you give the renter that 15% for tier 1, 5% for tier 2, 2.5% for tier 3, and just under 2 for tier 4, you can see per day your renters in total would be earning about $10.50 for less than 10 hours of work, and you as the owner would be netting about $195 per day. Now scale that up per month. In this scenario, you as the owner could be making a return of just under $6,000 per month. And if you want to look at the year, in this scenario, you could be bringing in $71,000 a year. And that would be enough to retire off of, if you ask me. A couple more things to note down here is that these numbers are based off of the 20,000 plots in the first land sale. Once we have a second land sale, these numbers will be cut in half, and then a third, fourth, and fifth land sale, these numbers will all get smaller. But Aaron has mentioned they don't plan to have a second land sale until the owners of the first land sale are making a decent return, because they want these players to want to buy more land in the second sale. So that makes a lot of sense. Keep in mind there's also blueprints and skins that is not taken into consideration in this spreadsheet. And also there are megacities that can be formed, and we don't have too many details on what the megacities can do, but that will also increase the fuel production somehow with those megacities, which could actually reduce the return a little bit on the other plots of land. And on the note of scholars or renters, if you do have a handful of plots and you're not sure how you're going to find someone to rent them out, I have a Discord called the GameFi Contact. I've been using this Discord to work with Axie and Fancy Bird scholars, and I plan on doing it for Illuvium scholars as well. I have this open to anyone who wants to join. So you can see we have over 100 scholars in this Discord, over 700 members, and not all of those scholars are my scholars. We have other managers in here for different games, and a lot who do plan on being managers for Illuvium. So if you are interested in joining this Discord, just send me a message on Discord or wherever you can find me. Join in, and when you do get some scholars, what I do is I set up private channels for each manager, and I make a role specifically for their scholars so they can assign that role for those scholars to get access to their channel. So for example, if I look in here, I can see that this particular scholar has a role for Banana DAO, which is a guild that I am working with for Fancy Bird scholarships. So again, if this interests you, just send me a message and I'll get you set up in here. In addition to this, I'll have a couple links below for a more detailed video on land that I've made and a couple videos on scholarships if that idea spiked your interest. I can make the spreadsheet available, but first I want to hear how you'll utilize it in the comments below. Don't forget to leave a like, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.